of delay. Now we're on.
All right. I think we're ready here this morning. Let's go ahead and call this October 23rd OMP committee meeting to order at exactly 8:30 a.m. on schedule. Thank you very much. Welcome. Glad to have everybody here. First off on the agenda, we got public session, public comments. Anybody from the public who would like to make any comments today? Hearing none, we'll move on. All right, item C, presentation discussion. First one was assigned to the gentleman who just walked out of the room.
Sorry
Here he
about
comes. All right, update on current projects. Eliezer, you got anything for us today?
Nothing that is out of the ordinary. So, the one item that I'll mention, this is something I spoke about at the board meeting, is the cancellation of that row number 17 on the front page. We have to now fix that final clarifier number 3. So until we have the final cost put together for that, then we'll put all of that on hold, and we may pick and choose some of the ones we're able to fund depending on the final cost. Because every bit of money that we budgeted for this may be needed for that rehab of the final clarifier, which went down unexpectedly. So, other than that, any questions about any of these projects on any of the 3 pages? Now I've started adding on the last one, you'll see where, just the tracking of that reconstitution project. So, I did submit the first quarterly report to RIA. I guess it was about a week ago, and I'll provide a copy of that to the board at the next meeting we have, the report that was submitted to them.
Yeah, it may be better for me to bring this up in item F with the members' discussion, but I do want to find out if we've made any progress on the target project as far as impact fees and things like that. So if you want to wait till then to discuss.
Okay, I'll bring that up, or ask me, I guess,
F.
E or F,
Okay.
either one,
Sure.
I'll address
I
it.
just drove by there yesterday and just thought about it.
I'll address it then. But any questions about it?
Anybody got any questions on the project report?
No, I looked at it yesterday.
That certainly helps. Give us an update. All right, we got some guests here from Arbor Land Design. Wanted to discuss a reservation of capacity for their project. Everybody's been handed a letter, obviously, this morning that went through extra travel that maybe shouldn't have this morning, but is here with us this morning. So, guys, welcome. Chris, I don't know if you want to introduce our guests for this discussion, or?
All right, so on the agenda, I have Austin Allen, who I knew, he's with Arbor Land Design. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Arbor Engineering.
Used to be Arbor Engineering, yes.
So I knew he was coming, and I was not so sure that he had anybody with him. So if you want to introduce Steve and his involvement with you guys, and then I may make this a little bit more interactive and combine the items 2 and 3 here, because I think the 2 are somewhat related to one another, and this is something, you've heard me discuss in the past. This has been something that we've been considering, or at least I've been considering for a number of months, and it really has to do with going back to the whole target development and reserving capacity for large projects, especially in portions of our system that are, where we have very limited capacity to begin with. So that being said, I'll let you guys speak. I'll interject as appropriate from our position, and then I'll discuss ours with everybody along the way too.
Sounds good. So yeah, I'm Austin Allen. I'm a land planner with Arbor Land Design in Greenville. This is Stephen Wright, land entitlement manager.
Land development
Manager with Pulte Group. We're working on a project in Seneca, around Seneca, that I think most people are aware of at this table. It's a larger development. We've kind of been working through the design conceptually, having a lot of conversations with different folks on this one. One of those being with y'all, system upgrades, kind of this whole basic study that we've worked through. A challenge that we've run into is sewer capacity. We feel like that we have, a pretty good idea based off what's existing there, that could serve, X amount of the percentage of an existing development. There are substantial upgrades kind of required to the existing system to come in and make this, provide all of the capacity for the anticipated build out that we're looking at. The difficulty that we're running into is right now, as you know, the policy is the capacity is on a first come, first served basis. That introduces a couple challenges for us, for the development team. One is it's difficult to consider and understand the project's feasibility when he's got to submit his package to corporate when there's not sewer capacity reserved, approved on the line. It makes things difficult from a financing standpoint. Really your investors, their asset team, groups like that have a hard time releasing additional funds to kind of move this thing along without, like a typical letter of availability that says, yep, we're out there, we've got the capacity to serve whatever utility that may be. In this case, it's sewer. I think if we could get to a point where, you could at least reserve the capacity for a certain amount of time that's already on the line, that would be a big benefit. What would also be helpful is, understanding that with this project, we do have a good bit of upgrades, kind of basically saying, once you, assuming that you pay for these upgrades, that capacity will be there and it'll be yours. What makes a lot of folks nervous is if it is on a first come, first served basis. We're doing a fairly large project that we've been, working on a site plan since April. With these larger projects, they definitely take longer to design, conceptualize, coordinate, and then entitle compared to your typical 50 lot subdivision, give or take. It makes folks nervous that as we're working through this longer process, that there's another group that can ultimately come online or in the same basin, prior to that, and ultimately kind of take capacity that we thought we had at project's conception. Another concern is you kind of get down the road with our process, and let's say a couple other projects have come online. Initially, there wasn't infrastructure improvements that were required, but you get down the road and that capacity is no longer available. So these guys, have to stomach a large amount of money to upgrade the system that, really when budget's already in place, they haven't really accounted for, so it becomes very difficult to assume and cover those costs. If you're kind of proactive with the capacity on the front end, I think that helps, you guys out from a planning standpoint of what's to come. I also think it helps, your planning team where, if we can kind of say, there's X amount of density figured for these areas, from a planning standpoint, and a zoning standpoint, and a growth standpoint, what does that mean? How do we need to kind of plan for the future, whether it be, future comp plans, so on and so forth. So really that's what, we'd like to discuss is an avenue of how, at least larger developments like this can come in and get that capacity reserved so they can submit that to their asset team and start getting those funds to kind of push this thing along. From our standpoint, we understand that this is certainly, a give and take. We understand that on y'all's side, it's very difficult to reserve capacity for a basin that ultimately could fall through for whatever reason it may be. So we just want to, we want to hear what y'all's thoughts are and, kind of hopefully come to some sort of resolution or, help kind of provide some direction to make an avenue to kind of start reserving the capacity and make sure that, y'all have assurances as well. So.
All right. And I obviously supportive of us developing some type of a policy that would allow for large developments that are gonna take place over a number of years, and possibly a number of phases, to allow them to be able to capture that capacity in the system, because as Austin mentioned, we are, as everybody knows, we're first come, first served when it comes to reserve and flow. So you say, and I don't know what the ultimate development size that this one would be, but just let's say it's the equivalent of 200 homes. That would be, what would that be? 200, so 60,000 gallons a day. One ERU is equal to 300 gallons. So it could be homes, it could be a commercial development, it could be an industry, but we convert everything back into that ERU calculation based on one ERU is equal to 300 gallons per day. So for a development that may be on the larger side of things, for them to be able to do the design, to be able to acquire the land, you could be talking months, if not, possibly years to get through all of that. We do not accept the flow from this project, or any project for that matter. It could be for a house, one house, until they apply for service and we approve the plans. So, in this case here, saying that, for a subdivision, for example, when I have to kind of look at the sun and blinded, when they, for a subdivision, the way it would work, they go through, they submit the initial design, and all we're looking at is the wastewater infrastructure. In most every case, if not every single case, there's going to be some back and forth with revisions. Seneca, we may approve it as submitted. Seneca Light and Water in this case may ask them to revise it based on a specification that they have that may be different than what we would require. So they do that, it triggers another revision for us. And finally, when everything's said and done, and both, and I just use Seneca Light and Water as an example here, when they approve it and we finally, we approve it and we give them the go-ahead to apply for that construction permit to be issued by the Department of Environmental Services, at that point is what triggers them to apply for capacity in our wastewater system. When that is applied for and they pay their impact fees and any other applicable fee that's due, that's what generates a letter from us that goes along with the engineer's packet down to Columbia, saying that we'll treat the flow with the system that will allow them to get their construction permit. So again, you can hear how this process could take months just to get to that point. Well, in the meantime, you may have somebody that could come in, do another fairly large development, but be able to get through their process quicker than these, Project A was able to do. So they, in some of these basins where we have limited capacity, and I differentiate that between capacity of the plant, because we've got capacity of the plant to serve tons of potential developments. But there's limitations in many cases in the system itself, due to pipe size, pump station size, wet weather issues that we have. There could be any number of things that would prohibit getting a large amount of flow to the plant. But if they are able to, if it's determined that they can be served with capacity now, whether it be limited or potentially full capacity with upgrades, that it would be necessary for them to fund to be able to get that capacity to us, then I think it's only fair to be able to determine or create some type of a method or policy that is uniform, that would apply to anybody, and we don't have to go through like a variance process every single time we would want to allow a large development to take place, that is agreed upon, that they can see. Now, that goes into this Exhibit B that you have in front of you. so the part at the bottom, the first part at the top is the item numbers 1, 2, and 3. That's a general summary of how we currently do things now. The new consideration would be to add an item 4 with those sub-items attached to it. Now, we'll say that I put this together last week. I did speak with, and Austin gave me the contact because he mentioned that REWA did, that they allowed for reservation of capacity up in the Greenville area, correct? So he provided me with a contact up there. I spoke to them about what they did, and after speaking with them, I put together what I felt would work for us, which is what you see before you today. I already ran this by Lawrence Flynn. He's made his modifications and has approved this in a draft format for consideration. The numbers that, the two important things that I do have in here is 150 ERUs or equivalent residential units. Again, that ties to that 300 gallons per day. I felt that would be what could be considered the floor of what we determined to be a large development. That is 45,000 gallons per day. I know that's kind of an odd number, but the 150 ERUs is a round number, which is why I went with that, and it's fairly close to 50,000. But as you go through, I've gone ahead and stated that I've recommended that to be 150, but other flows, if you want to consider that, are in that footnote, so you can see what the flows are along with the ERUs if you wish to go with something higher. And then we felt too that the developer, if they're going to secure capacity, and which essentially is going to take it away potentially for somebody else to use, that they needed to have some type of skin in the game as well. So we came up with item 4C. They must pay a non-refundable reservation fee equal to 20% of the available impact fees for the remaining portion of their project. If the project moves forward, in the future phases, that amount would be credited toward the impact fees that would be due. But if for whatever reason the project, it never continues or doesn't meet the conditions, because there is a 3-year limit as you read through here, then it's a forfeiture of that 20% that's collected. So
25.
I'm sorry, 20. What did I say?
20.
25%.
The first time you said it, I assumed it would. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
You said it the second time.
Yes, 25%. So it'd be a forfeiture of that, so that if it's beyond that 3-year mark, then they would have to pay the entire amount of the impact fee, and the reservation of that capacity would be gone. So what I'm doing here, and it's not that I'm vocalizing support for this project, but I'm vocalizing support for this policy that I think that they would be able to receive the benefit of or from, along with anybody else that would be in the same position that they would be, because this is it does make it difficult for them to be able to plan and even acquire land, not knowing that if the capacity is there today, is it going to be there tomorrow for them? Because even if they do that downstream assessment, that doesn't reserve the capacity for them. It just tells them that it's available at that time.
So this is all done pre-DES permit to construct.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And then once the DES permit to construct is issued, we fall back to full payment of impact fees at that time.
The
Remaining balance.
No, so when the second, so if it's done sequentially, and many of these large projects are going to have multiple phases. So you brought up the Target development. I think that what we've seen with that one is the phase 1, and I think there's a phase 2 supposedly that may happen, but it may not happen. But in the case of Target, if it worked this way here, when they came and they procured the impact fee, or procured the capacity in the treatment plant and the collection system for that project. So let's just call it 10,000, or let's call it 45,000 gallons, just so it kind of matches up with what we have here, then they pay the impact fees. It generates that letter from me that goes to Columbia. They get issued their construction permit by the state to build their wastewater infrastructure for whatever they apply for, which really in this case would be for the phase one part of the project. Once that permit is issued, it's going to be date stamped on it with the date of issue. That date starts the 3-year time frame to allow them to begin the design or planning for the phase two. It doesn't mean they have to do it all right there at the date. They've got 3 years to do it. They may choose to do it on the back end once some of the build out has taken place on the front end of it with the phase one. But we will not extend that. It's easy, very easy to extend an NCDES construction permit. All you have to do is ask them to extend it, and they typically are going to extend it. Well, we won't go with any extension. It'll be for that 3-year period, starting with the initial date that it was issued, and then they have that 3-year time frame to begin the work on the future phases. And then by I think I have it in here where they have 90 days beyond that 3-year expiration to get everything here to us, so that it does allow a little bit of a buffer to be made. Now, if it's a project with a phase 3 or a phase 4, that when they receive that second construction permit, that starts the 3-year process over again and allows them to be able to continue it for some of these larger projects.
So just to make sure I'm clear, so for you to issue the letter to DES to allow their permit to construct to be approved, do they still have to pay the full amount at that point, or is it still just the 25% reservation?
They would pay the full amount for what they're permitting in phase one.
Okay.
So with Target, and I'll make up numbers with this. We'll just call that Development A. We won't even speak because these are made up numbers. Development A, they want 45,000 gallons for phase one, but they know that they need, say, 100,000 gallons for the whole project. To generate that letter to get the construction permit for phase one, they have to pay the entire amount for the $45,000. And then for the additional $55,000 they're going to need, because we're going to need to know this up front, they have to pay 25% of what that amount would be. So I'm not asking for a vote on this today. I don't want that to be done, but what I want to do is I want to get it to you guys and let you, this committee consider it over the next month, because the numbers that I have in there are numbers that I support. You may wish something different. You may want to consider a large project something bigger or smaller. I don't recommend going smaller than 150 ERUs. But this is something we can consider. I plan on putting it on the agenda for the meeting next month for this committee. And at that time, if you're ready to bring it up to vote, to pass on to the board.
So are we being asked today by Arbor Land to actually consider this request for their project, or are they just here to support this policy for future consideration?
I'm going to let them explain this, because this is something we really haven't discussed. I just knew that we just had limitations in our system to be able to take on the whole project and to permit it now. We just don't have the capacity. We know that already. And this is a project that's going to flow, from my understanding, based on where I understand the general area that it may be located, that it would flow through the city of Seneca's collection system too.
Clifford Gillies? Yes, sir.
So it's one of these odd, the rare situations where you're going to have this going to hit our infrastructure, then hit Seneca, Light and Waters, then us again. So, it's and I can only speak for us, but I know that this is one of the stations we know is at the end of useful life, if it indeed is the station that's going to be serving this potential development. It needs to be replaced. anyways. Well, it's also one on the list that you see, you know, the master plan that is gonna need to be expanded for growth. It's in a, you know, growth corridor that's been identified. So, you know, that's my position as far as their request. I'll let them, because I don't know what their ultimate request would be.
Tell me, just stop me if I start saying anything wrong. So, you know, these guys from a development schedule standpoint, it is time sensitive. And I think we'd like to have some kind of resolution, so they can submit to their asset team, you know, within a reasonable time frame. But, you know, if this is something that would be considered formally at the next meeting, you know, I would be comfortable waiting, you know, for approval or adoption of that ordinance, not to, just for the reason of, you know, not to put y'all in a peculiar situation if, you know, the information ever comes out that there was some variance approved prior to, I guess, revising the policy.
And that was my next question. Do we even have the mechanism for us to even recommend to the board to approve this request?
I think that we would, because, you know, the board has the ability to grant a variance based on our first come, first served policy, I would think. And this is, the, you know, and we've had this happen before. This is probably the first time you've heard any developer make this request because you're new to this committee. But this is, you know, we've had a few come in. A lot of them, they may come in but a lot of them, they say they want it, they just never, you know, they just never want to come before the committee to ask. Again, I support this, and again, it's not a support for any development, you know, in particular. It's just a sort of support because I think it's a deficiency in the policy that we do have for something that would be a large development that would take a considerable amount of time to design and build.
You mentioned there was going to be infrastructure upgrades that would be required for this project. Do we have any idea what those upgrades would be, and is that on our system?
It will be, some of them will be, I believe Mr. Eliezer has them also, but our police pump station and possibly Force Main will have to have some sort of upgrades.
Yeah.
So we haven't mentioned it, you know, we have procured, and we're using our same general modeling engineer that does our downstream capacity studies. And they have, and it's currently still in draft review between us and them, just to look and see what exactly needs to be done, what the recommendations would be, and then ultimately to put the general
Are we
cost.
considering any upgrades that would increase capacity availability beyond this particular project, similar to Brent Little's project?
Yes, I think that it would have to, especially if it's going to be anything that we would want to move forward. We don't want to. Because again, you know, Lawrence Flynn, I don't know if he's ever spoken to you guys about it, but it's one of the things he always harps with me about is that we don't want to put ourselves in the position of picking winners and losers. He always calls them winners and losers. That by us saying that we'll allow them to fund the improvements that they need, that only they're going to get the benefit from, makes everybody else a loser because they're not going to be able to connect. So I think it's only fair that we would have to go through and upsize it as, you know, appropriate based on whatever the master plan has identified or the amended plan.
We're in the design and review process. We don't have a cost estimate of what those upgrades would be.
We'll have that, I think, when we get the final report. And again, we're waiting to get that now. I guess, you know, I'm reviewing it. I guess you have it, or do you have it for review?
Yeah, the preliminary.
And
So,
I'm assuming that's information you guys want to see at some
Very
point
helpful.
soon, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. So the
that's
process would stay the same other than when they first make contact and have the development, they want to reserve it, and then they just pay an upfront deposit until they get to that permanent construct phase.
Yes, sir, that's
And
correct.
that's basically what, we're just adding an element there into our normal process.
Yes, sir, that's right. Yeah, that element, and it's, you know, again, this is general in here. It may not be how it ultimately is worded when we do adopt it as policy, but that's a general description of what we envision is adding that that portion that we identified in item 4 and below is in red font.
So this technically would not cure the issue that the Development A example we've used, because even within phase 1 of Development A, they wanted to break their payments down into multiple payments based off of
Correct.
the out parcel development process.
That's
right? So this
correct.
would not would not have helped to resolve that issue. That still would have had to have gone through the same process, even if this is passed.
That's right,
Okay.
yes, sir, that's correct.
All right.
Because again, the reason that we have, and the way the impact fee policy is written, is they have to pay for the flow when it's assigned to the plant.
Correct.
They essentially are paying for the capacity.
And that's done when
The
the
reserve
permit is
plan.
issued
Yes,
by the
sir.
state.
That's correct.
Okay.
Just lack of knowing the process, what would happen if a developer came in and say request 50,000 gallons for a project, but their planning engineer messed up and they actually need, and we start that process, 3-year process, but later they find out they need 100,000 gallons, what would happen? How would you resolve that?
It's fairly rare. In fact, I can only think of one project
Okay.
that ever has been like that in my 8.5 years
Okay.
here, and it's the Hartwell Village, or what's it, Hartwell Village?
Hartwell Village.
Hartwell Village, where they actually, I think, the initial plan didn't include the student housing, and that was something that I think they sold off, maybe that parcel, and it was added to it, and they had their construction permit amended. They added, 20 to 30,000 more gallons
This one
to it.
time,
That's the only one I can think of, and that was back in 2017 or 18.
But then they'd still have to go through a permit modification with the state, right? With
They would.
DES, in order to get that additional capacity assigned to them. And at that point, they just have to pay the additional impact
That's
fee
correct.
on that additional gallon.
That's right. So if we have the capacity in the system, then it's no issue. They just, handle it like we do at that time. They have
Like
to,
a new project.
we'd have to run the model and confirm that we have capacity in the system. And if we have the capacity, they just apply for it and procure it at that time. But if we don't have the capacity, then we have to go through making the downstream improvements, just like with Mr. Little's project.
I certainly see the benefit to all of us. Number one, the sewer authority obviously gets the deposit up front, 25% deposit up front, sooner than waiting until the permit. It gives them a reservation to give them time to work through their due diligence and design and permitting and get ready for construction and get all their pricing in line. And it's a gamble, right? They're betting on themselves because it's a non-refundable. I mean,
Right.
they may pay 25%. The market may drop, interest rates may climb, they may stop the project, and it's non-refundable, right?
Right.
I mean, they
That's
don't
right.
get it back at any point in time.
That's right. And this will be from
Are there any
myself.
conditions where we would give it back? I mean, is that a consideration that we might even want to talk about, or we just want to say it's purely non-refundable?
I would say it's purely non-refundable. That would be my recommendation. Again, that goes back to the whole picking winners and losers. That they're taking somebody else's capacity away speculatively in that case. So I think we've got a project out there now where they procured capacity, they received a construction permit, they've extended the construction permit because it's expired. Mr. McLean may know the project I'm talking about. And we don't know if it was gonna happen or not, but we don't have the mechanism in place now to be able to claw that capacity back, even by refunding them the money. So it's that type of thing that we're trying to avoid, where they can basically pay for the capacity at a cheap rate and just sit on it until an optimal time for them to build it. And the reason we got from that is why they're not moving forward with it, is because building prices went up.
So obviously, under this proposed policy addition, we could claw the capacity back if the project doesn't move forward within the time frame and the permit to construct is never actually issued.
That's correct.
So we're just reserving it, we're not issuing it. So we can claw that reservation back, keep the deposit, the non-refundable deposit, and then free up the capacity for somebody else.
Yeah, so that's true. And in reality, the portion that we're reserving the capacity for, it's not even hitting the plant anyways, because it's not gonna hit the plant until we do the construction permit.
Right.
Before they do the construction permit, they gotta pay the full amount of fees anyways. So that's, I think, again, I do feel pretty strongly about this. I think it would be a tremendous benefit to Jamie Gilbert and the efforts he's doing with Oconee Economic Alliance, because, you know, it's oftentimes you have potential industrial users that may be large users that are gonna be the ones that are hit with this, because some of these projects, they may take multiple, you know, it could be 3 years just in construction alone for some of this type stuff.
So as a spoken representative of every developer in the world that we may ever deal with, you know, speaking on their behalf, the non-refundable, do you have any comments to that? You know, what we just discussed, would it be a non-refundable until the permit's issued?
I don't think so. And that wouldn't be due until after permit to construct for the first phase starts.
The
Before, right?
The full amount will be due
full
upon the
amount,
permit.
that's correct. So the 25% you would pay at the time
That is purely for reservation.
for reservation, correct. So you're reserving it for at least 3 years and 90 days, 3 years plus 90
But it's
days.
not permitted yet, it's just a reservation.
Reservation,
It's
yeah.
not officially yours until you get your permit to construct and the full impact fees are paid on the whole project as it's being developed.
That's a high number. If you're doing a large development,
Mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking potentially millions
mm-hmm,
of non-refundable.
right.
The,
And that's why I said it's a gamble, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when that would be due.
So when would the reservation payment be made?
When they procure their very first construction permit. So that's why we have to know if, you know, in item 4,
No, the reservation fee, when,
it's the very first permit.
not DES's permit.
When they fill out their permit for capacity in the system, so we have 2 permits we talk about here. The capacity permit that we do, which is when they pay their impact fees to us, and then there's the DES construction permit. So the permit I'm talking about now is the one they fill out here to procure capacity here at the plant.
That's
It would
when
be
the
due
25%.
at that time.
At that time.
That's
And then the
correct.
remaining 75% would be paid at the second permit process.
Yes, sir, that's
Okay.
right.
As each phase goes on.
As each phase, so the next phase, if there's, 3 or 4 or 5 phases, the next one, so say ultimately they want 300,000 gallons for project A. So 45,000 gallons at first, they procure that capacity, 45,000 gallons, then pay 25% of the remaining up to the full 300,000 gallons. They go through, design, get the next permit within the 3-year time for phase 2, which is going to be for an additional 55,000 gallons, bringing to 100. So then they pay the balance between what they've already paid at that.
75%.
Yes.
So if you're developing the entire site in the first phase, this policy doesn't even help you at all.
It would help us reserve capacity up front.
Well, if you
No, because you've got to pay the full amount for the entire project if you're developing the entire project in the first phase.
right, then it's
So
only be
there
for
is no
multiple-
reservation
Yeah.
for that scenario. There is no 25% reservation.
Exactly, that's exactly
It's
right.
only if you're breaking this down into phase 1, 2, and 3,
Which-
which you only want to get a permit to construct phase 1 right now.
Mhm.
Then you pay the 25% on phase 2 and
Phase 2,
3
3,
for
yeah.
later on.
That's correct.
Okay.
But I think where the benefit of it here is where you have like Mr. Little's project, we'll use that as an example, that we had the capacity, say we had the capacity to only serve his first building site, and he's got another one he wants to do as well. We can't handle the second phase of it. He can't start that building process without the downstream improvements being made. We can accept the flow from the first one, but before he does the second one, he has to reserve it. And the board did this, we reserved it by agreement for him in that case. So there was, we have done it before, but it was done by approval of entering into an agreement with him fronting the cost of the replacement of that.
That's why I want to clarify. I want to make sure we all understood each other that if you're developing the full site in phase 1, there is no reservation. You got to pay the full impact fee up front in order to reserve to be permitted that capacity.
But it can be reserved if you pay the full fee up front.
Well, it's permitted. Yeah, you
Yeah,
pay
you
the full
permit
impact
the
fee,
whole
it's
thing.
permitted, it's yours.
So say you're like we'll say a commercial development,
Mm-hmm.
that they're gonna build the whole thing at one time. They're gonna get their construction permit for 100,000 gallons, and that's all they're ever gonna need for that site. They're gonna pay for the whole 100,000 gallons up front, but because it's only one phase of a project, but where, you know, like this one here, where we have a limited capacity in the system, and we have to make improvements to be able to serve future development there, you can't do this project in a single phase without us going and making improvements downstream to be able to serve it. Otherwise, you're going to be capped at the phase one capacity anyways. But what this allows is when we go and we make these improvements, we commit to making the improvements, and we begin that design process and construction that would allow your project and others to come in. It will still allow you've already essentially reserve that capacity in these improvements so that nobody can come in and swoop it out from under you, so long as the conditions are met within, with this document.
So under their scenario, it's not that they're building it in phases, it's because they can only be permitted for so many
Exactly.
ERUs within a percentage of the ERUs for the whole development, and until those upgrades are made, they can reserve the remaining ERU capacity that they want to build.
Exactly
Is that what
right.
I'm hearing? Okay.
That's exactly the point with this one. And that's,
But if there was plenty of capacity and you were going to build the entire thing, there's no reservation. It's under the original process. You pay the full impact fee on day one.
that's right.
Okay.
Does that make sense for you?
Would there be an offsetting of fees if the developer is to help pay for
We
downstream improvements?
We would consider that, and based on what in this, you hear us talk about this Brent Little project.
Yep.
So what we did in his project, he offered to pay, and it was roughly $4 million to replace a pipe that we had, a force main that was undersized, to allow for his projects to move forward. And it also provided some, I don't remember what it was, 80,000 gallons of additional capacity beyond what he needed to allow for some additional growth as well beyond his site. Well, when we calculated his impact fees based on the old rate, whatever that was, it was, it was substantially lower than the capital improvements that he was going to make and basically provide to us as an in-kind
Okay.
donation. So the board agreed in that case that we would waive his impact fee and accept his capital contribution of this project, because it exceeded what we would have received in the impact fee to begin with. But it also, again, that pipe was one that was identified in our consent order, but it also allowed for growth to happen beyond his project too. So I think that would, we would consider something like that, I believe, on a case-by-case basis, but that would have to go before the board to make that ultimate decision. And, I'd provide the calculation of what we anticipated that we would collect in the capacity fees versus what it would cost for those upgrades. And there could be offsets, or there could be a 100% waive of the fee and acceptance of the improvement, case by case.
Excellent.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? I've kind of monopolized the
No.
questions
Good question.
here,
I mean,
Friday, so I want to open it up for anybody else that may have any thoughts or questions or anything.
Just one, just make sure I'm understanding. Okay, I think it's, was it Austin came up and he was concerned about capacity being taken away from him before he gets his project finished. And then we talked about paying 25% upfront to make sure that doesn't happen, because we know if they're paying the 25%, they are planning on doing this. There's no, holding on link. So if the project is gonna be, the impact fee is gonna be paid up front, how does that help them keep anything from being taken away from them?
We'll reserve it. So when we do our hydraulic modeling, we will have the consultant reserved that future capacity in the model. So it'll be modeled as if their project is already fully built out.
Okay, I see. Very good, thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
Championing
us.
that discussion on behalf of everyone. Appreciate your ideas and interest, and we'll certainly have it back on our next committee meeting agenda to discuss further once we've had time to evaluate the proposed policy amendment. And obviously, we don't have the authority to approve it. The full board would at the meeting following our next meeting, so it may take a little bit more time than what I would hope it would, but we'll see what we can do to speed it up to give you an answer as quickly as we could. I'd be interested to know what the upgrades are going to be required for that project and what those costs are,
That'd
and
be interesting.
what additional capacities might be generated in that area.
Once we get that back, Mr. McLean's getting a copy of it as well, since it certainly involves
Scotty can
light
just
and
go-
water. But it's, as far as I know, it's still in the engineer's court. We've been just going back and forth with questions and revisions that we, had in there. So he'll, once that's finalized, we'll make sure you get a copy of it.
Okay, perfect. All right, any other discussion on that item?
Have a good trip through Greenville. Once again.
I'll just give you this copy.
Oh,
I'll
thank
take
you.
that, read that, and if you've got my email address, you can provide any, your
Any thoughts
feelings,
we have? Absolutely.
to that.
Absolutely.
But I guess the good thing, is there's no more capacity to get taken out from under you because it's going to require improvements anyway, right? So,
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir. God, the rest of Thursday.
All right, update on the Member City Satellite Sewer System Corrective Action Plans.
all right, this is the last item I guess we have on here to really kind of discuss. So the Sewer Authority, and this was back in the spring, and this may be a little bit of a background I'll provide to you, Mr. Thompson. So back in I think it was in February 2024, and this has to do with the OJRSA's consent order. The Sewer Authority, back going to 2021 when we entered into this agreement with DHEC back at that time, they felt that we needed to step up our enforcement of the sewer use regulation on the upstream systems, the satellite sewer systems, and most of those that we serve are the cities. They have the bulk of them. We have a few private ones out there, but the cities are the largest of the makeup that we have. So, we began looking internally. We weren't gonna go and begin pointing fingers necessarily, requiring cities to begin making improvements to their system when we didn't have a full grasp of where the issues were in ours. So we went through and did a fairly comprehensive flow metering evaluation of our entire system. At that point, the engineers took that information and then they identified the priorities of where we needed to focus our efforts in doing further investigation. So running cameras through lines, doing a sewer system, a survey, further monitoring of installing portable flow meters. So we've gone through and done that. So all of this to say back, late 2023, early 2024, the engineers and our attorneys felt that we had enough information to then begin going to the cities and letting them know that yes, your city has identifiable issues. We can quantify them to an extent, but we don't know exactly where the issues are in your cities with inflow and infiltration, because our consent order has to do with wet weather overflows primarily. So we met with the cities, and Allison, I believe that it was the request at that time, February 2024, for each of the cities to come up and develop their own corrective action plan, or CAP as we often refer to it as. So there was triggers and benchmarks that had to be met along the way, high level development of a capital improvement plan, development of a methodology that the cities were going to use to go and identify where their sources, their most likely sources of inflow and infiltration were coming from, then develop a priority to go and do exactly like we did. Prioritize finding sources and fixing it, looking at the highest areas of inflow first and then working their way down to the lower priorities. So now that brings us up to spring of 25. We were going through that. At that time, it was a different committee that was, what was it called? It had a long name, Sewer Implementation Feasibility Committee or something like that, that was looking at the recommendations that this new committee is looking at implementing. So, and at that time, one of the recommendations was possible discussion of consolidation. Well, with that being on the table, internally, we felt like we're not, if consolidation is a possibility, that we didn't want to necessarily put the cities put in a lot of money in the development of their current, their fiscal year 2026 and future budgets, if they may be turning their system over anyway. So we just put the whole CAP program on hold pending the final recommendations as presented by that committee. The committee presented those back at, if you remember, we had that meeting at the Tri-County Oconee campus, and they were presented. The board had accepted those recommendations at the August meeting. So now, we have to submit a biannual, and you see that on the very top of this page as a reminder for us to do it. November 11th, I think it's November 10th every year, November 11th every year, and May 11th every year. We have to provide DHEC, an update of all the work we've done in the last 6 months and all the work we foresee coming for every item that we have in our consent order. So we've asked the cities to mirror that and provide us with updates by the end of October and by the end of April, because we provide those updates to DHEC as part of our consent order. So, because again, they really wanted us to ensure that we were enforcing regulation on the upstream users. So those are provided to them. So we figure, well, now, you probably saw Allison's email that she sent out to the cities the other day, reminded them that that report is due next Friday. I think the 31st is next Friday. It's to be signed by the city administrators and the utilities directors for work that had been done regarding what has been identified with the CAP for the previous 6 months, and then what's to be coming in the next 6 months as well. There's a general format that was provided to them, but they can elect to do it however they want to. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that would be worth mentioning. Really, I guess that really is it. So, again, I guess now that that's all said and done, we'll pick up and begin, looking and considering the CAPs for each of the cities. And I know Walhalla had they had a full-blown CMOM that was done for the consent order that you guys were under, and I think are still under, with DHEC. So there, you have guidance with that that you'd be able to use. But we've got all the cities sent us a substantial amount of information back about a year ago, and then I think there's some stuff that's been asked for by the Reconstitution Committee to help with some of the items that's being worked on there. But that's just kind of an update of where we are with that as we postponed it, and now we'll pick it back up now that we've got some direction of.
I mean, regardless of the Reconstitution Committee, you gotta get these CMOMs, these consent orders taken care of. So, yeah, okay.
So, any questions about that? And then, really it's just kind of a reminder that those reports are gonna be due, and I don't, they're very likely did a lot that may have been done in the last 6 months, because we did put that pause on it. But begin thinking about what will be done in the next 6 months.
All right, well, George, go ahead and, if we're done with that, we'll go ahead and roll into your compliance matters and environmental regulatory matters.
Okay, I only have one thing with the environmental. We had another break. You probably know about this. We had another break on the Speeds Creek force main.
The contractor?
No, this one's that same force main that, the cut out this piece of pipe that I've got here that we have about 2 or 3 leaks on a year. That's one of our consent order items that is not related to wet weather issues. We just have, that's one that, and you can see it on here. We've got, it's in this that we're planning and it's, we have it funded. It was in the budget to go ahead and design the new replacement force main for that. But we're waiting to get our on-call or indefinite delivery engineer on board, which we hope to bring to the board for approval at the January board meeting. So that'll be the very first project that we hand them, is to begin the design of that force main. We don't have the funding already lined up to do the replacement, but we want to have something in hand for when we do identify the funding source to do that.
Possibly RIA?
Well, possibly RIA. We're gonna look at, we'll of course look at everybody for assistance with that before we look at, using, user rates to pay for it. But that's, probably the highest priority that we have right now, is to fix that, because it's, we can't fix it. We don't have the internal resources to be able to go and do it. It's, some points of this force main is deep. It's along the roadway. You gotta have specialized equipment to be able to do it. So we typically, we contract that work out each time. And that's the one you've heard me say for years and years and years. We are replacing that force main right now, but we're just replacing it 20 feet at a time. So that's the update with that. And then the miscellaneous is something I thought of that I'll go ahead and say, this morning. I know that, and I think emails possibly, and maybe phone calls, and I think, maybe some other correspondence has reached, I believe, for certain you, Mr. Mulder, as well as us, from the Cross Creek community regarding odors. In particular, we had a rash of odor calls back in May of last year. And if you remember, I think that we identified that as when we said we were going to accept that waste from that package plant to try to help them out. And I think it came back to bite us. But we've received a few off and on since then from the community over at Cross Creek. So I've got Johnny McCall, who's our operations director for the plant itself. I've got him riding through Cross Creek first thing every morning. He's going over there with the windows down and just to see, and he sends us an update every morning. So we've had a couple mornings where he said he's been able to detect a light scent, but most mornings is no complaint or no odor at all that he's able to detect. So just say all that to let you guys know that this is something, we never take odor complaints lightly, but we're, in this case too, we're going a little bit above and beyond by trying to ride through and see if we're able to detect it to head off any issues that we have. Also, with the Wexford community, we do have complaints from them more frequently than we do even with Cross Creek, and that's the pump stations on Davis Creek Road. I know that Seneca Light and Water, they're feeding sodium hypochlorite or liquid bleach into their system to try to knock down the development of the hydrogen sulfide gas. And we've got charcoal filters in the manholes because sewers need to breathe, so you don't need to seal the manholes. Those filters work, I think they work really well because we've got detectors that we have inside the system as well as hanging up outside, and you can tell a tremendous difference in those filters. But where we cannot seal is at the pump station itself. So we're looking at, when I was at WEFTEC, which is the largest water conference, I think, in the world, there were 22,000 people there. one of the greatest things I found when I was there was this potential product that we may look at. He came up and met with us on Tuesday, Kyle and Johnny and Michael McLean, our collection system guy, and myself, and we may look at doing a demo out at that station to be able to knock down the remainder of that problem. Because, you know, this has been, my wife teaches at Ravenel, and I've heard about it from her for years, you know, about you drive by, about how bad it stinks. And this you know this predates any, you know, me working here. That, you know, that line was put in to serve Jacobs back in the mid to late 80s, if I remember correctly. And it's been a, you know, odorous issue ever since then. So we're, you know, we continue, don't, you know, just because you don't hear updates from us doesn't mean that we're not always actively thinking about ways to eliminate those. We don't want to just, you know, fight them and reduce the number. We want to get them to zero. We don't want to be bad neighbors, like I've said before. Just because we work at a wastewater treatment facility doesn't mean we like smelling it, you know? So just keep in mind that we, you know, we do take all those complaints seriously. It's been a long time, I think, since I've updated you guys on that, but that's where we are.
So
with those.
my question, mine just got one question. So you have a man drive through there every day, and he'll contact you, Chris. There's a mile loader going through this place. How often does that correspond with a call from a Cross Creek resident?
We haven't gotten any calls
Okay,
from
very
over
good.
there in a while.
I haven't received anything since
Okay, good.
that serious odor problem that we had. So.
Good.
And this is the time of year, you know, spring and fall are typically the times of year you're
Low
gonna get
pressure.
complaints because, you know, that's exactly right. So, and Johnny, he's made mention to me before, he wanted to make sure that he had, you know, a person, maybe on multiple occasions, flag him down and thank him for what we do, you know.
Oh, you've
so-
got to use the OJRSA truck?
He takes the
Okay,
truck
cool.
over there with the
Okay, very
logo,
good.
and yeah,
Good
he said-
advertisement. Yep.
So, yeah, so it's, you know, and I felt that, you know, it's
And none
also
of the complaints are you're not doing anything about it. I
Right.
think they understand that, you know, we are trying to address it. So, yeah.
Yep, that's right.
All right, Mr. Dow, you had a question under item F.
Yes, you know, I drive through by the Target going to Seneca. I drive to Target place all the time. I see the construction, all the piping. And I remember yesterday I was driving through, and it dawned on me that you were having a problem with them paying their impact fees. Did that ever get resolved?
So what we looked at doing, so the developer contacted us back, I can't remember if it was late August, early September. So DES, Department of Environmental Services, they confirmed to us that they issued them that construction permit in error. It never should have been issued to them because they did not receive the letter from us saying we were willing to treat the flow from the project, which is a requirement for them to issue that. So we decided, you know, in discussion with us and DES, that we would try to work towards some type of a solution, or, you know, extend it, or find a way to make it work where they did not have to go and revoke the construction permit. So first item up there was that I be able to speak to the developer. So I spoke to the developer about it, and they, you know, like Mr. Mulder, I think, had asked about paying impact fees, you know, for parts of the project. And they made a proposal to us that if, you know, what would it take to be able to do that, to pay only the impact fee for Target, and then as future projects happened there, be it an out parcel or whatever that was part of this phase one that they're building now, what would it take for us to allow them to pay impact fees when those projects were, you know, built, you know, begun, you know, they get a building permit. So I told them what would have to happen, and I would be 100% supportive of this, would be that they see if DES would amend the construction permit and reduce the flow on that permit to only what was necessary to serve the Target building.
Right.
I was fine with doing that. So they went to DES. DES, I think they spoke internally with their general counsel, from what I understand, and they did not wish to do that. So we just found this out I think it was the end of last week. So then we had an answer. So the current policy we have still in place is they got to pay 100% of what, they were requesting for that first phase of the development. So we gave them until next Friday, the 31st, to go ahead and fill out that permit for capacity in the system and go ahead and pay those impact fees. So Amanda Kelly here sent that out to them yesterday by email, what the fees were and how to go about completing that permit application. So that's where that stands right now.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Anybody else got anything that they'd like to bring to the table for the discussion of the board, for the committee? All right. Well, that's all the items on our agenda. Is there anything else, Mr. Eliezer, that we need to discuss?
No, sir. I know this has been a longer meeting than we typically have for O&P, but I thank you guys for your attention to this, because the large development thing, that has been weighing on me for months, if not years. And it just is coincidental that it had to do with.
Well, and I want to make sure we clarify, because I could see that they were thinking that they would only have to pay 25% for the entire development up front. I want to make sure they understood that there was still going to be 100% payment on development. Now, if there are capacity upgrades that need to be done, they can reserve that until those upgrades are finished, but they still had to pay 100% of what was available to them today.
It benefits them. I mean, they have the capacity, no matter whether they do anything or not, for 3 years and 90 days. Boom. So, yeah.
All right, do I hear a motion we adjourn?
Yeah, I make a motion and we adjourn.
I got a motion and a second. All in favor by way of aye. Opposed? I didn't think there'd be any opposed. I'm going to stick around long.